So, as part of scenario learning, when we are working on multiple scenarios being a Scrum Master, because as a Scrum Master, as in when we know, we facilitates the team, right? So, trying to solve the kind of impediments what team has, all that will be done by the Scrum Master for the team that they are facing, right? Either it can be difficulty in understanding the product requirements, the user stories, or if there is any technical difficulties they are facing, right? In terms of the timeline, in terms of the technical complexity, uncertainty, all that. So these things will be done by the Scrum Masters, as in when we know. So when we are learning Scrum Master real-time scenarios, because I could see many people have done their Scrum certifications, Scrum Master certifications, either it can be of anything. But understanding about different scenarios and how this can be addressed, especially now and then, because as part of my Scrum Master training coaching I give for various professionals, I could see there is a immense need, understanding over the scenarios, right? So what scenarios that we come across, how these can be addressed, especially when we are working on the real environment, when we got an opportunity to work as a Scrum Master, or else when we are applying for any kind of jobs, right? So when you're trying to apply for any kind of jobs, being a Scrum role, when we are applying for, we must be knowing about what are the different scenarios we come across and how this can be addressed. This kind of learning is always required to sustain ourselves professionally. There were many, but I have taken one scenario over here. So this is to manage scope creep during the sprint. Because as in when we know, when we start this, as long as we have not done the sprint planning, okay, when sprint started officially, we can do as many changes as we can. But sometimes there are some situations where product owner can introduce new requirements in the middle of the sprint once it is started. There are scenarios we come across. Fundamental rule is that once the sprint is started, no changes will be entitled. This is the fundamental understanding. But in the real world, it may not be the same, right? So sometimes customer may want, a product owner wants some new requirements to be added to the existing sprint. So which majorly leads to the scope creep, deviation in scope, I can say that. So when we are Scrum Masters, wherein if these kind of situations we come across, how are we going to handle this? And what action steps that are to be taken? And there were some formulas as part of Scrum Master real-time training is concerned. There were some formulas which generally I explain. So that's a different thing, right? So when we are learning Scrum Master real-time scenarios, then we have different formulas wherein to identify what are the added ones, right? So what are the removed ones, right? So what are the committed ones? Depends on that. We initiate a formula and we do that. But there are some action steps that are to be considered when we are working on the Scrum Master role, wherein the first thing, being a Scrum Master, we need to facilitate the discussion between the PO and as well as development team so that we can assess the impact of the new requirements. I'll give you a scenario. Let's say that there were a sprint goal that is defined for a project wherein there were four user stories, which are equivalent to 18 story points. Assume that, right? So we have 18 story points now. Now, all of a sudden, the third user story, which to be addressed and which to be changed, right? So either it can be of changes on the existing user story or adding some new requirements to the existing ones. So let us decide that we have decided it's a 2 week sprint for all team members who are addressing. We have done the effort estimation, productivity of the team were already decided. So the work assessment on the daily Scrum part that were already created. Now When there is any new requirement is added, automatically the amount of effort is increased. Business value, it could be a business because effort, when we have added the effort, so it can be due to because of the business value, technical complexity, it can be an uncertainty, it can be of risk. Everything is involved in the new requirement. So it could impact on the existing sprint that we have created, which deviates, which leads to scope creep. So it's always important wherein we need to initiate with product owner and developing at the same time development team is the first action that is to be performed by the scrum master because we are facilitators. We facilitate the scrum events. Okay, that is point number one. Second, we need to decide whether this adjusting to the existing sprint, whether it really differs the new requirements to the next sprint or not. Because in Scrum implementation, when we do, as in when we know, sprints will start one after another. Once the sprint is completed, we are going to start the next sprint. So before that, we do this sprint retrospection so that we see and make sure whether have we completed all the sprint goals that was defined for a particular sprint or not, and what and how best can be done for the next sprint. That is something that we have to be decided in this regard. So we need to adjust the current sprint scope. At the same time, we also see the differing of new requirements to the next sprint and all that. So that we need to ensure, right? So here we need to, because sometimes the existing user story to be updated to the next level or few more requirements are adding and we need to write user story. For that, we need to provide some story points. Every story point, minimum one story point you have taken. It may be more than 4, 5 hours, 6, 8 hours time, which can be taken even sometimes, right? So depends on the size and complexity varies. So we must ensure, we must take a decision, especially in this regard, team's decision will be the highest priority. Next, we must ensure the team focus and velocity that is to be maintained because velocity based upon the previous work that is done by the team, right? So based upon the story points that were completed by the team in the previous sprint. So based on that, we can calculate, right, what must be the velocity of the team when they are working on, because towards reaching the release plan that we have made. For example, we have made release planning for the next 3 months. Assume that it is 2 week sprints all the time. So somewhere around you will be getting somewhere around 2 weeks means monthly 2 sprints. 3 months, 3 to 6. 6 sprints will be taken. Average normally for release, any release, fundamental understanding is somewhere around 6 to 8 sprints we develop. So that's where generally we need to maintain the velocity. So for that, generally velocity planning we have to do, wherein we need to identify the difference between the velocity as well as the capacity as well by considering the story points, by considering the productive hours that we have taken, by considering even how many weeks of sprint it was, how many story points that were completed so far, what will be the average. So that we need to decide. So we must, being a scrum master, we have to ensure what must be the team focus, what must be the velocity or meant to be maintained. Everything will be decided over here. So further, there are some couple of formulas generally we use by considering the existing story points or the one which was detected or committed or something. There were some formulas that normally we use to calculate the percentage amount of the percentage of amount of the scope that is deviated, that could deviate the existing sprint. Based on that, whether this to be continued or this can be continued in the existing sprint or this can be transferred to the next sprint will be decided based on that. So for that, there are some formulas which on Scrum real-time scenario-based coaching where we will be discussing all these. Right, so this is all about one scenario I have taken. So there are a couple of scenarios like this. So will be discussed in the coming days.